Hello everybody, welcome to the very first video of In the Kitchen at Hilltop Farm. Now you're probably wondering why we seem to be driving along in a car. Well, this is purely and simply the introduction to tell you a bit about me and my family and my little suburban homestead and where my passion for food first came from. So I thought, rather than sit and you have to stare at my ugly face the whole time, I thought, why not take you on a little country drive on the beautiful Fleurieu Peninsula here in South Australia. We're just south of Adelaide, which is the capital, and I thought you can take in the scenery. We're a week away from Christmas, and the temperature, according to my car, is telling me it's 35 degrees Celsius, which is getting close up near the 100 for those of you that deal in Fahrenheit. First thing you should know probably is my name is Jay. I first developed an interest in cooking, I guess, in the late 80s, early 90s. I became a house husband when my wife gave birth to our daughter, our first daughter, and she had severe postnatal depression. We didn't know that's what it was back in those days, but all I knew was she was going back to work, she couldn't deal with this, and it was my problem. So I stayed home with our 6-week-old baby and took over the house. And whereas my wife had always complained about the housework, and in particular about cooking, and I will say it's not her forte, I enjoyed it. I took to it like a duck to water. And I was interested in not just cooking an evening meal to fill everyone's tummies. My interest went further than that. I wanted something that was nutritious, that tasted good, and that looked good. You had to walk into the house and smell the smells and see the food and actually want to eat it. So I started doing some homework. But in doing homework, I stumbled across something else. I stumbled across the fact that when I looked on the packets and boxes on the supermarket shelves, and I looked at the ingredients, there were things listed on there that I had no idea what they were. So I did my homework again, and I discovered not only that these numbers and strange sounding things were in the most part chemicals, some of them are actually known to be carcinogenic, as well as others that, you know, are responsible for triggering a multitude of other diseases and symptoms and conditions. And I was appalled. I was absolutely horrified. And I've discovered the loophole, apparently, is when you read that it's below the daily level of what you're allowed of, you know, B26, 9FK, or whatever it happens to be. As long as you have below a certain level, then it's deemed safe. So you pick up a packet of something, and according to the manufacturer and according to all the government bodies and the world organizations, it's safe. But do they take into account the fact that that same chemical might be in 3 or 4 different things you eat that day? In which case, you're having more than the safe limit. And that's just one chemical. The same thing could happen with a multitude of chemicals. And when I was learning about this, I cast my mind back to a field trip we went on when I first went to school. I must have only been about, I would say, 6, 7, and we were doing sort of studies at school on the dairy industry and cows and where milk came from and so forth. And one of the things we did on this field trip was we went to a factory, and one of the things they made at the factory was margarine. And I can remember vividly as a child looking at this goo that was mixing around in this massive bowl the size of a swimming pool. And it was a murky, bluey grey colour. And when I inquired as to what it was, I was told that's the margarine. And I said, but when we get it from the supermarket, it doesn't look like that. And they said, no, we put food colouring in it to make it go yellow. So, the fact that margarine is supposed to be a substitute for butter, but at nowhere in the process of making butter do they have to put food colouring in to disguise a bluey grey colour. And even as a young child, I knew somewhere deep inside of me that was not right. We shouldn't be eating that. But life goes on, and as I say, I never gave it another thought until I was feeding my own family. So my philosophy has been, for some time, not only is it got to smell good, and it's got to look good, and it's got to be nutritious, it's got to have as few as possible, preferably none at all, chemicals in it. Not an easy feat. Not an easy feat. So, that meant for a long time I spent a lot of time in the supermarket reading labels. It would take me hours to do my shop because I couldn't find anything that wasn't full of this stuff. But in the course of doing my shopping over a period of time, I started to notice that the supermarkets were starting to push their own brands. The old fashion brands, the name brands that you grew up with as a child. And I'm sure it's the same in all countries. So whatever brands and products you grew up with as a child and your parents grew up with as children, they got pushed to the top shelf, to the bottom shelf, so that the products that are in prime view, the waist to eye view area of the supermarket, is all taken up with their own brands, which I will say, for the most part, seem to have more chemicals in it than other things. Now, in Australia, well, certainly South Australia, there are two main supermarkets. In South Australia, they are Coles and Woolworths. I know both of those stores are nationwide, but there are other stores here. We have Foodland, we have Aldi, the eastern states I know have, or they used to have at least, Safeway. But at this point in time, Woolworths and Coles are the big boys. They're the main players. They hold the monopoly. And a few years ago, I became aware that these two giants started buying petrol stations. And then they started buying liquor stores, chains of liquor stores. To the point now, it's very hard to find an independent liquor store. Most liquor stores are owned by Woolworths or Coles. There's a huge chain here, discount chain called Dan Murphy's. My understanding is they are owned by Woolworths. So, we are at a point where we have two supermarket chains that run the country. Because let's face it, I mean, they're not going to, they want the money. But if they wanted to, they could both decide one morning, well, we're not opening up to sell to the public, we're going to hold the country at ransom. And the country will collapse. Because where else do they go? And I think that's a very dangerous position to be in. And what makes it worse is Woolworths and Coles, they're not even owned by Australian companies. So the money goes overseas. So, I have a fight against supermarkets. I don't like them. I realise we have no choice but to use them occasionally. But I get as little as I can from them. I certainly won't buy my fresh produce from them. Absolutely not. And I urge other people to do the same thing. Now, that's enough of the ranting. Moving on from the ranting, the channel is going to predominantly be about cooking. I will take you on a ride of cooking and baking the most wonderful foods that look good and smell good and are nutritious. Some of them will be frugal. Some of them will be extravagant. But one thing they will be is not full of chemicals. The other thing I'll be doing a lot of on the channel is preserving. There are times of year when certain things are in season and are cheap, or you might be lucky enough to be growing it in your own kitchen garden. We have a small kitchen garden. We also have a lot of fruit trees. So we will be going through dehydrating, drying things, preserving it in the form of water bath canning, pressure canning. Now, pressure canning, I will just quickly touch on, is a very new concept in Australia. I had never ever heard of it up until about 2 years ago. And water bath canning wasn't called canning, it was just called preserving. But I have discovered pressure canning. The equipment is not easy to get in Australia because, to my knowledge, virtually no one does it. But I have found a place, a distributor, where you can get the equipment. So I will go through all that when we actually get to canning. I will go through all that with you. So anyone in Australia will be able to get anything they need to follow down that road. And obviously anyone overseas, well, Americans are fine and Canadians are fine. I don't know what the situation in Europe or the UK is with that kind of thing. But yeah, if anyone does know, please feel free to leave comments in the comment section down below. I'll be very interested to hear about that. My ancestry is from England. I was born in England, came here as a child. And certainly no one in my family has ever heard of it. So if it is a thing in the UK, I'm guessing it's something that's relatively recent. The other thing that really, really irritates me, and I don't understand it, if you have a passion for cooking and a passion for being in the kitchen, why do you race around like a mad headless chicken to cook? I'm sick to death of seeing celebrity chefs. Okay, and I won't name anyone. You've all seen them. You all know who I mean. And they're cooking things, and they're chopping things, and they're flicking things, and they're going at 100 miles an hour. And it's almost as if they're showing off to make you feel incompetent, because your average person can't chop an onion, in 5 seconds flat. And that really irritates me, because I think, where is the pleasure in doing that? I mean, have you ever actually tried to do that? It's insane. There is no pleasure whatsoever in doing that. So, what I suggest is you do what I do. It's a pleasure. You take your time. Okay? And if you're a busy career person, you plan ahead. You cook things that can be reheated. Or you cook something in the slow cooker. You assemble it all the night before. And before you leave for work, you turn on the slow cooker. There are ways to do it where you get enjoyment. No one's going to enjoy racing around as if you're under the starter's pistol and you've got so many minutes to get it done, or for some reason you fail the task. No one wants that. So don't put yourself under pressure. It's ridiculous. Okay, so I probably bored you way long enough for our first video, but it's kind of telling you what we're going to be about, where we're at. You have any questions about the channel, me, my family, anything, leave comment in the comments below. If you think this sounds like it could be for you, or even if you're just a little bit curious as to how it's going to pan out, hit that subscribe button. And if you've enjoyed looking at this beautiful countryside I call home, hit the like button. And brace yourself, because on the 1st of January, the first of our proper videos rolls out. Until then, we'll see you all later. Bye.